Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back for Prāṇaśakti. We're going to continue to explore the relationship between prana and the mind today, and specifically the relationship between the mind and the breath, and then how that matures into a relationship between awareness and prana. So awareness is the more subtle expression of the mind. It's the more purified expression of mind, and prana being the more subtle and purified expression of the breath. And beyond just subtle and purified, they're also, for all intents and purposes, the motivating factors for their corresponding counterpart. Awareness is the motivating factor, the catalyst for mind, and prana is the motivating factor or catalyst for the breath. And so we experience on a more gross, tangible level mind and breath. But as we refine our awareness, we're able to tap into that which actually is the origin of each of those elements. So we'll look at those two, and then we'll really look at the magic that occurs when we are able to successfully unify mind and breath, awareness and prana, and what happens then. And ultimately what happens is that the mind has the opportunity to connect and sort of latch onto something that gives it a very distinct sense of purpose and fulfillment. And what human being out there doesn't crave those two things? And with that purpose and fulfillment also comes a certain degree of freedom or liberation, even just the freedom from having to try to figure out what to think about next. It becomes quite simple. The mind gets to just be absorbed in the experience of the breath. And initially, the mind will think that it is governing the breath. It's going to try to control every little breath, the tempo, the depth, all of it. And we'll realize more and more that the breath is actually guiding the mind and heavily influencing the mind more so than the other way around. Similarly, with prana and awareness, here we're actually looking at two relatively equal entities or elements, and you could trace those two things even further back to their origins. If you go all the way to the beginning, the origin for prana is Shakti, that which moves, that which breathes life into, that which manifests. And if you go all the way back to the origin of awareness, you have Shiva. You have pure consciousness. So you've got the union of Shiva with Shakti as we are unifying awareness and prana. And in case you weren't made aware, that's the point of it all. That's what we are here to try to facilitate, is this reunion of Shiva and Shakti, the two seemingly polar aspects of the self, the manifest self remembering its origin point, and being reunited and remembering that any sense of disunion was actually just illusion. Okay, so enough waxing hypothetical. Let's go ahead and listen into some insight from Panditji. This is coming from the Uniting Mind and Breath lesson. We nourish the mind and reclaim its original radiance and vibrancy by training the mind to stay focused on the concentrated pool of Prāṇaśakti, the life force at the center of the forehead. Mind and breath are inseparable friends. They stay together and work together. Neither is static. They are ever pulsating waves of consciousness. In regard to these two inseparable, ever vibrating, intelligent forces, focusing the mind is a twofold process: constant awareness of the movement of the breath and confining that awareness in a well-defined space at the center of the forehead. So let me repeat this again. In regard to these two inseparable, ever vibrating, intelligent forces, mind and breath, focusing the mind is a twofold process: constant awareness of the movement of the breath. So that might be movement of the space of the belly as the breath comes and goes in conjunction with the movement of the diaphragm. That might be movement within the nostrils, feeling as the breath enters and exits through that space. That will eventually mature into movement of prana, where we're able to tangibly sense pulsation or an effortless, genuinely effortless rise and fall of Prāṇaśakti as that sort of supersedes the movement of the physical element of the breath. So, constant awareness of the movement of the breath and confining that awareness in a well-defined space. And specifically for these purposes, that space is the center of the forehead, culminating at Agya Chakra. Unless the mind is fully aware of the movement of the breath and is absorbed in this awareness, the mind and Prāṇaśakti will flow on two separate tracks. This seeming separation allows disturbances, distractions, inertia, and confusion to barge in. The mind is fully nourished and protected when it is united with the breath so profoundly that it has no awareness of anything other than the subtle movement of the breath. No awareness of and no desire to be anywhere other than with this breath. This constant awareness of the breath's sustained, subtle movement is a state in which the mind is fully absorbed in the breath. This is the first step in the process of focusing the mind. We accomplish this first step by paying attention to the movement of the breath at the opening of the nostrils, by paying attention to the joyful feeling at the inner corners of the eyes, and by paying attention to the inward flow of energy at the eyebrow center, and to the upward lift of consciousness toward the center of the forehead. Okay, so those 4 points that were just identified: opening of the nostrils, inner corners of the eyes, eyebrow center, and forehead center, which, as I mentioned, is subsumed into Agya Chakra. As this process matures, we become less and less aware of the physical dimension of the inhalation and exhalation, and increasingly aware of the non-physical space corresponding to the part of our body above our throat, particularly the space in the front of our face and forehead. Eventually, we are barely aware of the 4 distinct spaces corresponding to the opening of the nostrils, the inner corners of the eyes, the center between the eyebrows, and the center of the forehead. They have instead become a continuum. Our awareness is now focused on the space in the front of our face and forehead. Okay. The second step involves confining the mind, now fully absorbed in the breath, in the space corresponding to the center of the forehead. The mind is now absorbed in the ascending and descending waves of energy as we inhale and exhale. This absorption becomes so refined that the mind no longer feels its existence apart from the ascending and descending waves of energy and consciousness. At this point, the union of the mind and the breath reaches maturity. We experience this fully matured union as pure pulsation, constantly rising and subsiding in the highly concentrated space in the center of the forehead. Although the physicality of space vanishes in this state of consciousness, we may experience the pranic pulsation as if it were effortlessly, involuntarily, of its own accord, moving up and down. When we inhale, the mind follows, the mind follows the upward moving pranic pulsation. And when we exhale, it follows the downward moving pulsation. This upward and downward flow of awareness is extremely subtle. We hardly feel that we are breathing. Because from the very beginning of the practice, from Aharana Pranayama to Samikarana Pranayama, all the way through the main body of Vishoka meditation, the mind and breath are engaged together. These twin forces undergo the process of refinement at the same pace. This is what empowers the mind to experience the upward and downward moving pranic current in the center of the forehead. So we've had a chance to experience these techniques now, Aharana, Samikarana, and we're starting to move into the main body of Vishoka meditation as a pranayama itself, right? So this is the main body of Vishoka meditation, stage 1, and just an introduction so that we have an opportunity to experience this seemingly involuntary, entirely effortless ascension and descension of Prāṇaśakti or pranic awareness, sensitivity, flowing along this pathway. And then we will see where it takes us from here. Okay, stay tuned. See you soon.